Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney talks a big game about breaking free from U.S. trade and boosting Canada's sovereignty. But his investment portfolio, well, it tells a different story. It's loaded with U.S. assets and barely a dime in Canadian markets. So as trade tensions rise, more are now left asking, is Carney really invested in Canada, or is he using his position of power to cash in on Wall Street? Let's dig in.
Have no potential equity stake, no potential stock options, or any other potential future payments that you currently anticipate could come from either Strike or Brookfield.
So what I have is cash, personal real estate, and they're assets all those assets were divested into a blind trust, which is managed by a trustee. And it literally means exactly what it says. I don't know what's in it.
A bombshell analysis of Carney's assets reveals that the majority of his investments are concentrated in United States-based companies, signaling his strong preference for our southern neighbors' economy and their domestic markets. By way of background, Carney released his assets as part of the newly minted Prime Minister's mandate to comply with the Conflict of Interest Act within 120 days of being elected. Following the disclosure of his 16-page ethics commissioner filings on July 11th, Blacklock's reported that Carney's extensive stock holdings are primarily based in American companies spanning sectors such as oil, railways, retail, credit cards, airlines, and pharmaceuticals. This highlights his deep investment in U.S. markets. The Investigative Journalism Foundation further dug down into these assets, and it turns out that out of 567 entities in an investment account managed by a third party, his so-called super ethical blind trust, which means that Carney has apparently no control or influence now over said companies, guess how many of them are Canadian? 3. Yes, you heard that right. Just 3 Canadian companies out of a whopping 567. That's Canadian National Resources, Canadian Pacific Kansas City, and Lululemon. Meanwhile, the rest of his roughly 92% investments are tied to US-based companies. Talk about an American dream, and so much for standing up for Canadians. Let's not forget that Carney campaigned on a Standing Up for Canada platform, but he used government polling to script this anti-American election plan that now crumbles in light of his financial portfolio.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
No possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
Now, as Robert Shepard, a professor at Carleton University's School of Public Policy, told the IJF, these filings aren't inherently unethical, nor do they necessarily break any rules. But let's be real, it's a political lightning rod. When your Prime Minister's portfolio is basically a love letter to Wall Street, people are going to ask questions. Is this guy really betting on Canada's future, or is he just another globalist with his taxpayer-funded messaging, pretending his elbows are up when the rest of us are left doing some weird perverted rendition of the chicken dance? Meanwhile, 9 companies with ties to Carney, such as Stripe and Brookfield Asset Management, have already lobbied the Prime Minister's office on U.S. tariffs and trade. As concerns mount about these conflicts of interest in Carney's intertwined financial ties, this lobbying, alongside Canada's decision to rescind most counter tariffs quietly during the campaign, and the digital services tax. This highlights the complex interplay between Carney's business interests and his role as prime minister. Regardless, and across the board, it's clear that Carney's money is in America. And as the IJF notes, these are big names like Airbnb, Microsoft, and Wells Fargo. The IJF summarized these findings perfectly. Carney's American-dominated investments reflect a trend of weak domestic investment, an issue that has gained renewed attention amid rising trade uncertainty. A Financial Times story from May revealed that despite pressure from government officials and business executives to direct more capital toward the Canadian market, the country's largest pension fund now holds nearly half of its assets in the United States, thanks to Mark Carney. 3 months ago, he was campaigning on boosting Canada's economy and called our relationship with the United States effectively over. Remember this?
The global economy is fundamentally different today than it was yesterday. Our old relationship with the United States is over. Well, this is a tragedy. It is also the new reality. Canada must be looking elsewhere to expand our trade, to build our economy, and to protect our sovereignty. And if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will.
So while he's been vocal about expanding trade beyond our southern neighbor to protect our sovereignty, apparently trying to align Canada more with the European Union,
we are seeing the danger of over-reliance on the United States economically and also from a security perspective. So we will, as I said the other day, we will cooperate where necessary, when it's in both of our interests very clearly, but we won't necessarily cooperate. So we, as a confident country with an ambitious plan, we look outwards. We look to Europe, we look to Asia, we look to new partners that we're going to deepen with. And that's a big element of what we're laying out in the speech.
And disavowing our largest and most reliable trade partner, it's clear that his own portfolio is singing a different tune. Carney's money proves he's more America first, leaving Canadians wondering if their future is just a pawn in his high-stakes portfolio. When your prime minister's wealth is heavily invested in the very country he campaigned against, it reveals where his true loyalties lie and where he bets on the greatest success. So, are we building Canada, or are we just a pit stop on Carney's way to Wall Street? For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. By now, you're probably asking, who really is Mark Carney? Check out our coverage and support our work critical of his globalist ties, climate agenda, and economic policies that prioritize corporate interests and other countries over everyday Canadians at thecarneyfiles.com. That's thecarneyfiles.com.